The cheapest glue gun in a real 16-way test cost $11, and it outperformed most of the competition, costing far more. Some of it 3, 4, 5 times the price. Not a lucky trigger pull. Not one flattering number cherry-picked off a spec sheet. A full battery of tests, run the same way on every single tool, regardless of price. And the $11 option came out ahead of tools that cost $100 more. You're going to hear exactly which brand that was, and exactly what it beat, at the very end of this list. Here's the assumption this whole category runs on. Spend more, get a better tool. 16 glue guns went through the exact same battery of tests, and that assumption didn't hold up nearly as often as the price tags on the shelf would suggest. Some of the most expensive tools in that lineup underperformed tools costing a fifth as much. Some of the cheapest ones matched or beat brands most people have never heard of, a reason to trust. And every single one of the 5 that did are still sitting on shelves right now, priced like nobody's bothered to notice. A glue gun is one of those tools almost nobody researches before buying. You grab whatever's on the shelf at the craft store or whatever shows up first in a search, because it's a $15 impulse purchase, not a decision that feels like it deserves real research the way a table saw or a car battery might. That's exactly the kind of category where price becomes a lazy stand-in for quality, because nobody's bothering to actually measure the alternative before buying, and nobody's going back to check afterward whether the more expensive option actually delivered anything the cheap one didn't. 16 of these got measured, minute by minute, gram by gram, and the results didn't sort themselves neatly by price the way you'd expect walking down that same store aisle. My name's Walt Renner. I dig into real, independent test data before I trust a price tag, the same as every video on this channel. No review units, no ads for any of these 5 brands. This particular video came from a real 16-tool comparison somebody else ran, methodically, with actual measuring equipment instead of a gut feeling. And I went through every single number in it, looking specifically for the cheap tools that had no business performing the way they did against tools costing far more. That's a slightly different job than most of what I usually do on this channel. Most weeks, I'm the one tracking down the lab data or the service records myself. This time, the hard work was already done, run by somebody with a thermal probe and a scale, and no reason to make any single brand look better than the numbers actually showed. My job was going through it entry by entry and pulling out the 5 that told the most honest, most useful story for anybody standing in an aisle wondering whether the $11 option is a mistake. If you're new here, this is what this channel does every single week. Real test data instead of a guess. No sponsorships, nothing padded out just to fill time. If that's useful to you, hit subscribe. It costs nothing, and it's the only reason a channel like this can keep buying the products it tests instead of taking free ones. Now, let's get into it. Quick note on how this particular comparison actually worked, since it's worth knowing before the numbers start. Every single tool in this 16-way test ran through the identical sequence. A thermal probe tracking temperature minute by minute from a cold start. A timed check for when glue first began flowing under constant trigger pressure. A measured single trigger pull after a full warm-up. A 30-second maximum output test, and a 10-minute standby drip check. Same conditions, same order, same measuring equipment for every tool regardless of price. That consistency is what makes an $11 tool beating tools costing 10 times as much mean something instead of being an apples to oranges coincidence. And it's the same reason a 14-year-old glue gun that claimed fireproof construction and then genuinely caught fire under that exact same rigor is worth trusting as a real result rather than dismissing as a fluke. Worth knowing what didn't make this list too, since it says something about how this comparison actually worked. One tool in the full 16-way lineup claimed to be made of fireproof material, a real, specific safety claim printed right on the packaging. Under real testing, it caught fire, not once, but on a repeated attempt after the first test. That's not one of the 5 brands in this video, and it's exactly the kind of result that makes the rest of this data worth trusting. A test rigorous enough to catch a genuinely dangerous false claim, one that could matter a lot more than a slow warm-up time, is a test rigorous enough that an $11 tool beating a $121 tool actually means something rather than being a rounding error somebody glossed over. 5 real numbers, worst surprise to biggest, finishing with the one that should make you rethink the entire "you get what you pay for" assumption in this category. Number 5. Kamasa, $26. The priciest of the 5 brands on this list. And it's here because of what it did against a tool costing nearly 5 times more. Organized by average finish across every single test run in this comparison: heat up speed, glue per pull, 30-second output, drip resistance, glue temperature, Kamasa and the $121 Sure Bonder tied for the best overall average finish of any tool in the entire 16-way lineup, both landing at the same 3.8 average. Kamasa also produced the single hottest glue reading of the entire test, 418.9 degrees, hotter than every other tool, including the $121 pick it tied. It was also among the fastest to reach a full working temperature, hitting 300 degrees in under 2.5 minutes. Sit with that average finish number for a second, because it's not one lucky test result. An average finish across 5 or 6 separate categories means a tool has to show up consistently strong across all of them, not just win one dramatic metric and coast on it. Kamasa didn't get to that tied score by dominating one category and phoning in the rest. It got there by being genuinely competitive in nearly every single test in the entire lineup. The same discipline the $121 tool needed a heating element roughly 5 times more expensive to achieve. A $26 heating element doing the same consistent job as a heating element built for a tool costing nearly $100 more is the kind of engineering story that never makes it onto a bottle label, because there's no marketing angle in admitting your cheap tool doesn't need the expensive one's hardware to match its results. Run the actual comparison between those 2 tied tools for a second, because it tells you something the average finish number alone doesn't. The Sure Bonder did edge out Kamasa on raw speed and maximum volume for a big job, which makes real sense at that price. It's built with a larger heating element for exactly that kind of continuous, heavy-duty use. Kamasa dripped slightly less and made hotter glue. For most people doing normal-sized projects rather than running a production line, that's not a real gap. That's a coin flip, at a price that isn't close to a coin flip. It's also the most expensive tool on this list, which is exactly why it opens the countdown instead of closing it. Everything from here gets cheaper, and the story gets more dramatic, not less. Number 4. Romeo, $25. And this is the entry that earns its spot by never having a bad test result, rather than by winning any single one. Heat-up speed landed solidly mid-pack. Glue output in the 30-second test landed right around 10 grams, respectable against tools costing 2 and 3 times as much. Glue temperature came in at 380.8 degrees, hot enough for a strong, well-penetrated bond. No single number on this tool is the best in the whole test. No single number is a weakness either. And in a 16-way comparison, a tool with 0 real weak points at $25, is quietly doing something most of the field, cheap and expensive alike, couldn't manage. Consistency like that is easy to undervalue next to a flashier headline number. But think about what it actually means for the person using the tool. A glue gun that wins one category and disappoints in another means you're planning around its weakness every time you pick it up, remembering to compensate for the slow warm-up or the weak flow every single time you reach for it. A glue gun with no weakness at all means you stop thinking about the tool entirely and just get the job done, which is the whole point of owning one in the first place. And that kind of unremarkable reliability is exactly what $25 is buying here. Number 3. Chandler Tool, $22. And this one beat a tool costing 5.5 times as much on a specific real number. In the single trigger pull test, measuring exactly how much glue comes out with one squeeze, Chandler Tool laid down 1.08 grams. The $121 Sure Bonder, the most expensive tool in the entire 16-way lineup, laid down 1 gram on that same test. A $22 tool outperformed the most expensive tool tested on that specific metric. Chandler Tool also tied for the least amount of drip of any glue gun tested, one of only 2 tools out of 16 with no measurable drip at all after 10 minutes of standby, the other being a $68 competitor. Chandler Tool's own marketing claims the gun drips up to 87% less than a typical hot glue gun. Independent testing actually backs that claim up, which is rare enough in this niche to be worth pointing out on its own, separate from the performance numbers. That last point deserves a beat of its own. Most marketing claims in this niche get quietly disproven the moment somebody actually measures them. Chandler Tool made a specific, checkable claim, and when an independent test measured it directly, the claim held. That's a small thing on its own, but it's exactly the kind of small thing that tells you a company built its product around the number instead of building the number around the marketing copy after the fact. And it's the kind of company worth rewarding with a purchase precisely because it did the harder thing first. Number 2. Gorilla, $15, corded, no battery math to worry about at all. It's not the flashiest entry on this list, and I'm not going to oversell it as one. Warm-up was a little slower than the fastest tools in the lineup, reaching 300 degrees at just over 4 minutes. Where it earns its spot is what it did with that heat once it had it. A real, working, built-in stand that actually keeps the tool upright between uses instead of tipping over mid-project. Dual temperature settings for finer control on delicate work, and a 30-second glue output right around 10 grams, only about half a gram behind Black & Decker, despite costing more than the $11 option and a fraction of nearly everything else on the shelf. $15 for a tool that does the basics correctly, with a stand that actually works, isn't a dramatic reveal. It's a quietly solid pick for exactly the price it's asking, and not every genuine gold mine on a list like this one needs to be the most dramatic story in the room. Cordless tools in this category almost always get sold as the bare tool, with the assumption you're already carrying a specific brand's batteries around from other equipment. Gorilla sidesteps that question entirely by being corded, no battery, no charger, no compatibility question to research before you buy. Just a plug and a trigger, which is exactly the kind of simplicity that keeps a price this low honest, instead of hiding extra costs behind a lower sticker number. Number 1, and this is the one from the start of this video. Black & Decker, $11, the cheapest tool in the entire 16-way test by a wide margin. corded, no battery to worry about at all. The test's own conclusion put it plainly. It outperformed most of the more expensive competition. Second fastest glue per trigger pull in the whole lineup at 0.85 grams, behind only Chandler Tool. Second hottest glue reading of the entire test at 1.393.1 degrees, behind only Kamasa. Fast to heat, strong output, hot glue for $11, less than a tenth of what the most expensive tool in the same test cost. If you want the single cheapest possible entry point into this entire category that isn't a compromise, this is the number the data points to. And it's the whole reason this list exists. $11 is genuinely difficult to beat as a floor price in almost any tool category. And the usual expectation at that price is that you're buying something barely functional. A tool that exists to be technically cheaper than the next option up, rather than to actually do the job well. Black & Decker's actual numbers don't read like a barely functional tool. They read like a tool that happens to be inexpensive, which is a meaningfully different thing. And it's exactly the gap this whole video is built around. There's an honest reason this specific brand can hit that price point without cutting the corners that usually come with it. Black & Decker isn't a small startup trying to undercut the market to build a customer base from nothing. It's a company with enough manufacturing scale behind other tool categories, drills, sanders, saws, that a basic corded glue gun is a small, efficient product for them to build well at volume, using supply chains and heating element designs already proven out on tools costing far more. It's not a stretch into unfamiliar territory the way it might be for a brand new name chasing the same price point with none of that infrastructure behind it. Here's the pattern sitting underneath all 5 of these picks, and it's worth noticing that every single one of them sits well under $30, most of them well under $25. None of them are the most expensive tool in their category. None of them are unknown, sketchy brands with no real construction behind them either. They're mid-tier, unglamorous, genuinely cheap names that happen to get measured against tools costing 2, 3, 5 times as much, using a thermal probe and a scale instead of a marketing page, and held their own or won outright. That's not luck repeating 5 separate times. That's what happens when you stop assuming the price tag is the test result. It's worth being fair to the top of the market too, since this isn't a video arguing expensive tools are a scam. The $121 Sure Bonder genuinely earned its spot at the top of the average finish ranking, tied, not beaten. It's a real, capable tool built for volume and speed on demanding jobs. And for somebody running that kind of workload constantly, the extra cost buys a larger heating element and more sustained output than any $25 tool is built to sustain hour after hour. The point isn't that premium tools are fake. The point is that the assumption, more expensive automatically means better for me, breaks down constantly in a category like this one. And the only way to know where it breaks down is to actually run the test instead of trusting the price tag to do that thinking for you. Ask yourself honestly what most glue gun purchases actually look like. A parent gluing together a school project at 11 at night. Someone fixing a loose trim piece around the house. A crafter working a weekend project, not running 8 hours of continuous production on a factory floor. For that entire range of normal, real-world use, the difference between a tied 3.8 average finish and the actual best-in-test tool is close to academic. The difference between $11 and $121 is not academic at all. And it's the difference most people are quietly paying without ever knowing there was a cheaper option sitting right next to it on the exact same shelf. That's exactly the gap these 5 brands are sitting in. Priced like afterthoughts, performing like tools that should cost considerably more, and mostly invisible on a store shelf next to bigger, louder marketing budgets that never had to prove anything on a thermal probe or a scale to earn their shelf space. Here's the whole list, fast, before you go. Kamasa at $26, tied for the best overall average finish against a tool costing nearly 5 times more. Romeo at $25, no weaknesses anywhere in the data. Chandler Tool at $22, beating a $121 tool on trigger pull output and living up to its own drip resistance claim. Gorilla at $15, a quietly solid corded pick with no battery math involved. And Black & Decker at $11, the cheapest tool in the entire test and the one that outperformed most of the far pricier competition around it, which is exactly why it's the one this whole list was building toward. Tell me in the comments which one of these you're already running, or which one you're picking up after this. I read every single one of these, and if you've put hours on any of these 5, I want to hear how they held up over time, not just on the bench. Every single pick on this list today came in under $30, most of them well under $25, and the cheapest one won outright. Cheap and good aren't opposites in this category. They're just two things nobody bothers measuring together, because it's easier to sell a bigger number on a box than to hand a customer the actual reason a smaller number performs just as well. And easier still to let a shopper assume the two numbers, price and performance, are always moving in the same direction, when the actual data says otherwise more often than the shelf would ever let on. If someone in your life is about to spend $120 on a glue gun, assuming the price guarantees the performance, send them this first. And since the $11 tool in this test just outperformed options costing 10 times as much, wait until you see what happens when I run this same comparison on the category almost nobody expects it in: kitchen knives. Some of those numbers are going to surprise you even more than this one did.